Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Chicago PD treats Hailey Upton's intelligence replacement better than Tracy Spiridaco's character. Midway through the year, Chicago PD Season 12 is already treating Hailey Upton's intelligence replacement better than it did Tracy Spiridaco's detective. Joining the NBC and Wolf Entertainment franchise on the heels of Sophia Bush's exit as Erin Lindsay in Chicago PD, she immediately became an important part of Hank Voight's core team. That said, the last couple of years before her ultimate decision to leave the Windy City was harrowing, to say the least. Almost all members of intelligence have experienced some kind of trauma, but Upton's stretch of tragedies was not only heartbreaking, but it's also frustrating. Arguably the most infuriating part of Upton's arc in Chicago PD was her failed marriage with Jay Halstead. Starting as professional partners, the pair eventually fell in love and got married in secret. That said, due to Jessa Lee Soffer's disappointing departure in Chicago PD Season 10, the police procedural left Upton alone, lonely, and confused. Wanting a fresh start, she opted to leave Chicago altogether. This created a void in Voight's team, which forced them to finally bring in a new character as Upton's replacement in Toya Turner's Kiana Cook. Cook started out as a patrol officer under Trudy Platt in Chicago PD Season 12. Briefly, it seemed like the One Chicago procedural was going to resurrect that aspect of its storytelling, but it became evident that it was only a matter of time before Cook was brought in upstairs, especially after the harrowing murder of Martell in the Chicago PD Season 12 premiere. Wolf Entertainment didn't waste time making her mark in intelligence, and in Friends and Family, the show delves into her background properly, with the introduction of her father and mother. As it turns out, Cook's lineage is a little bit more complicated and interesting than everything that Chicago PD has done thus far. She is the product of a one-time thing between her parents, who come from very different social classes. Her dad, William Cook, is middle class, while her mom, Patricia Dixon, is from an affluent family. Cook clearly has a complicated relationship with her maternal side, something that Chicago PD is expected to tackle moving forward, especially since her grandfather supposedly wants to be an alderman. Cook's family story is an ongoing narrative in Chicago PD Season 12, and it's likely to be part of a bigger storyline down the road. This is a different approach to Upton's backstory in the show. Over time, certain details about her personal life were revealed, but the majority of it was via trauma-induced flashbacks, or through her sharing painful memories while working on a case. It was never a focal point in Chicago PD, which is particularly disappointing when one considers her special history with Platt. Unlike Chicago Fire, which has made it a point to explore its characters' backstories, its law enforcement counterpart has largely focused on their jobs. Any kind of personal narrative is mostly tied to the relationships within intelligence, which includes Adam Ruzek and Kim Burgess' romance. Other times they just so happen to be at the center of a case. Based on what's revealed about her past, Upton's narrative had the best potential to be an overarching narrative, as it could relate to Platt's own backstory. Unfortunately, this wasn't utilized. Cook's backstory is unique in Chicago PD, not just because of how the show is telling it, but also because this is the first time that someone from intelligence may actually have a pull in Chicago politics. The procedural has yet to introduce his grandfather, but between what's revealed about his mom and his aspirations to be an alderman, it's safe to say that he has some kind of influence in the city. This adds to Chicago PD reviving Hank playing politics with Deputy Chief Charlie Reed. Intelligence is not new to going up against bigger adversaries, be it a criminal enterprise or a corrupt member of a governing body. However, Cook having an in with the upper class in Chicago poses new interesting storylines that Chicago PD hasn't done before, if that is the direction that they are going. As the season goes on, however, NBC and Wolf Entertainment hopefully take advantage of this situation and not waste it again, just like Upton's family narrative. Hailey Upton's exit from Chicago PD was one of the most emotional departures the show has ever seen. After Tracy Spiridaco's spent years crafting a multidimensional, hardened yet vulnerable detective, her final scenes left fans with an empty feeling, partly because of the lack of care given to her send-off. Now, as Chicago PD moves forward with her replacement, it's becoming more and more evident that the show is treating the new character with a level of attention and development that Hailey Upton was rarely afforded, especially in her final seasons. A quietly diminished exit. Tracy Spiridaco's Hailey Upton first arrived on Chicago PD in Season 4, quickly proving herself as a valuable member of intelligence. Her no-nonsense attitude, sharp instincts, and underlying emotional depth made her an intriguing presence in the unit. However, over time, her character suffered from inconsistent writing. Much of her development became tied to her relationship with Jay Halstead, played by Jessa Lee Soffer, rather than her personal growth as a detective. By the time Spiridaco's departure was announced, fans hoped she'd get a satisfying send-off, one that honored her years of dedication to intelligence and gave her the closure she deserved. Instead, Hailey's final episodes were noticeably lackluster. The departure of Jay Halstead already destabilized her character, and rather than refocusing on her, the show placed her in a loop of emotional turmoil without providing a meaningful resolution. When she ultimately left, it felt rushed, as though Chicago PD was eager to move on rather than fully process the impact of losing such a crucial character. The arrival of Hailey's replacement. Now that Hailey is gone, Chicago PD has introduced a new character to take her place in intelligence. What's striking is how much effort the writers are putting into making her feel like a natural part of the team. The show is taking its time to establish her backstory, motivations, and relationships with the other members of intelligence. There's a clear desire to ensure that audiences connect with her in a way that Hailey never quite received outside of her relationship with Halstead. This stark contrast in handling highlights a frustrating trend in Chicago PD, a pattern of underdeveloping female characters, particularly when they no longer serve a romantic storyline. With Hailey, her most significant moments often revolved around Jay. Even her emotional struggles were tied to his departure. But with the new character, the emphasis seems to be on making her an individual, not just an extension of another character. Why the difference in treatment? One has to wonder why Chicago PD is suddenly so invested in carefully integrating this new detective when Hailey, who was a staple of the show for years, was given a much weaker arc toward the end. Part of it could be the showrunners learning from past mistakes, realizing they mishandled Hailey's character and wanting to avoid doing the same thing again. However, it also raises the question of whether they were simply uninterested in fully exploring Hailey's character when they had the chance. It's possible that because Hailey was introduced during a time when the show was still heavily invested in the dynamic between Jay Halstead and Erin Lindsay, played by Sophia Bush, she was never meant to stand on her own. The narrative placed her in a relationship with Jay as soon as it became viable, which in turn limited the ways in which she could develop independently. When Halstead left, the writers seemed unsure of how to handle Hailey without him, leading to the frustrating and ultimately unfulfilling storyline that marked her final season.